Bouma here. Serving as military specialist for Carleton County, I'm going to give you the next presentation on the World War II timeline. This is the East Africa Campaign 1941. So last time we talked about um, that was, of course, the fall of British Somaliland, French Somaliland, and of course now this is the Allied counterattack. So what we're doing today is talking about the British and Allied response. So, of course, it was fought. This campaign was fought on the Horn of Africa during the Second World War by the British Empire, the British Commonwealth of Nations, and several allies against forces of Italy um, from June 1940 to November 1941. Under the leadership of the British Middle East Command, British Allied forces involved consisted not only of regular British troops but also many recruits from British Commonwealth nations: Sudan, British Somaliland, British East Africa, the Indian Empire, South Africa, Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, uh, Nyasaland, British West Africa, as well as the British Mandate of Palestine. In addition to the British and Commonwealth forces, there were Ethiopian irregular forces, Free French forces, and Free Belgian forces. Italian forces included Italian. Of course, they included Ethiopian irregular force. Of course, the Italian forces, sorry, included Italian nationals, East African colonials, Eritreans, Abyssinians, and Somalis, and as a small number of German volunteers, the German Motorized Company. The majority of the Italian forces were East African colonials, led by Italian officers. And you can see here Italian East Africa, Egyptian Sudan, and this is more just of the map of Operation East Africa. So information of the Italian withdrawal was quickly decrypted by the British, and knowing the Italian plans, Lieutenant General William Platt was able to start his offensive into Eritrea on the 18th of January 1941, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. After the fall of British Somaliland, General Archibald Wavell's plan for the counteroffensive by British and Commonwealth forces included a northern front led by William Platt, who was promoted to Lieutenant General in early January 1941, and a southern front led by Lieutenant General Alan Cunningham, who had taken over the East African force at the start of November 1940. A third front would be created by the forces which retook British Somaliland by sea. Wavell plans for Platt to advance southward from Sudan through Eritrea and into Ethiopia, and for Cunningham to advance northwards from Kenya through Italian Somaliland and into Ethiopia. While Platt advanced from the north and Cunningham from the south, Wavell planned for a third force to be landed in British Somaliland in an amphibious assault, and then to retake that colony prior to advancing into Ethiopia. According to the plan, all three forces were to ultimately join forces at the capital of Italian East Africa, Addis Ababa. The capture of Italian East Africa would remove land-based threats to supplies and reinforcements coming from Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa, and British East Africa, and passing through the Suez Canal for the campaign in North Africa, and opened the overland route from Cape Town to Cairo. Ethiopian offensive. So on the 18th of January 1941, Emperor Selassie crossed the border near the village of Idla. 2 days later, he joined Gideon Force, which was already in Ethiopia. The standard of the Lion of Judah was raised again. So this is an overland map here of just of everyday East Africa every day, and this is exactly what I'm going to talk about at Addis Ababa and in the Battle of KEREN. I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about this is overall what we're going to look at as far as how Italy is going to be cut back. And this is so you can see the Duke of Aosta surrender with full military honors. Assab falls. So this is all just stuff that's coming up in this presentation here. It goes until and this continued on until November of 41, and of course, with the outcome we will continue to talk about is, of course, Italian losses are definitely massively Italian forces massively defeated, as you can see just in that overall that map that how it plays out. Amazing, tens of thousands, over 200,000 captured. It's unbelievable. As I've talked in other presentations, the Italian forces were not nearly as well equipped and capable as the British forces, and in far as tactics and as far as vehicles were concerned. Um, so that's why the Germans had to go in, and that was certainly the Germans had to go in North Africa, and that was certainly one of the cases we talked about. So the crossing was made some 450 miles, 720 kilometers northwest of Addis Ababa. The capital, Emperor Salisi, had been forced to flee when the Italian general Pietro Badoglio, captured the city from the Ethiopians on 5th of May 1936 during the Second Italia-Abyssinian War. So Emperor Salisi and the Gideon force under Major Ode Wingate conducted a campaign for the next 3 months in the Ethiopian province of Gojam, where they initially faced opposing forces of about 25,000 men. Emperor Salisi and the Gideon force rallied Ethiopian patriots wherever they went using powerful loudspeakers, which had been supplied to the patriot forces to announce the presence of the emperor and inducing local tribal leaders and Italian Iscaris to desert the Italian cause. Using surprise and bluff, this relatively small force disrupted Italian supply lines and provided important intelligence to the more conventional British and Commonwealth forces. In March, there was a furious clash between Colonel Sanford and Wingate. Sanford maintained in a signal to headquarters in Khartoum that the resources being absorbed by Wingate for the comparatively slow advance of his conventional forces was paralyzing Patriot activities by diverting rifles, ammunition, and pack saddles exclusively to Wingate's force instead of giving equal priority to the Patriots, which would have a greater impact through swift and dispersed action, not just in Gojam, but with the assistance of Sanford's Mission 101 in other provinces as well. This was followed by a signal of rebuttal from Wingate to Platt, who had to rebuke them both. Um, the dispute overflowed into Wingate's formations, leading to the mutiny of the 2nd Ethiopian Battalion at the start of April. Wingate had to leave his sickbed. He was suffering from an attack of malaria to dismiss the battalion's commander, after which it rallied to its new leader and performed well for the rest of the campaign. So the first victory on March 6, 1941, Ethiopia's patriots won their first victory when they took Bir. From 27th of February to March 3rd, the Gideon force harried the well-sited defensive forts of Bir, while propagandists yelling through their megaphones fostered the Italian belief that they were being attacked by a substantial force and provoked many desertions. Finally, on the 4th of March, fearing his line of communication to Deber Makos was threatened, Colonel Natali, not knowing that the attacking force counted only 450 men, pulled out of Bir and headed for Dimbakra on the road to Debre Marcos. Harried from behind by the frontier battalion, Natali's column met the 2nd Ethiopian Battalion head-on just west of Dembaka. The Ethiopian Battalion put up a stiff resistance but were overwhelmed. However, Natali had been shaken by recent events and abandoned Dembaka on 8th of March and pulled all the garrisons back to Debre. The American United Press Agency reported the East African War has turned into a race to Addis Ababa between the army of Abyssinian volunteers and the mechanized South African troops, who stand in such remarkable contrast to each other. The South African troops are advancing from Mogadishu toward Harar, which lies about 30 miles, 48 kilometers from the Djibouti Addis Ababa railway line. And this is the troops here as they're planning their attack. A lot of times they didn't even, they could just build them out of sand. Plan their attacks by using certain, different rocks, different labels, and then put them into the ground, make mounds, and then plan where they're going to attack and how they're going to take out enemy positions, gun positions, and whatnot. In less than 3 months, Gideon Force less the 2nd Ethiopian Battalion, which was no longer a combatant force after the engagement of Dembaka, and an ever-growing army of Ethiopian patriots were advancing on the Italian fortifications at Debre Marcos, the capital of Gojam. But Lieutenant Colonel Boasted, commanding the frontier battalion, embarked on a guerrilla campaign which involved small parties of 50 or so men silently infiltrating to within 10 yards, 9 meters of an enemy position in the middle of the night, and then attacking with grenades and bayonets to clear the defenders. By early April, the defenders had been forced back to the inner defensive ring at Debre Marcos. Because of the critical situation to the south, the Duke of Aosta ordered the withdrawal from Debre Marcos, and on the 4th of April, 12,000 people, including 4,000 women, under their commander, Colonel Huraventano, began the 200-mile, 320-kilometer trek to Safartek, and then beyond to Desi. On the 6th of April, Haile Selassie entered Debre Marcos and was formally greeted by Wingate, Gideon Force, and Haile, the powerful local patriot leader. Here's some more of the pictures of the area. So Addis Ababa. While Debre Marcos and Addis Dera were being captured, other Ethiopian patriots under Ras Ababe Arege consolidated themselves around Addis Ababa in preparation for Emperor Selassie's return, pushing against the Italian-backed forces. In response to the rapidly advancing British and Commonwealth forces and to the general uprising of Ethiopian patriots, the Italians in Ethiopia retreated to the mountain fortresses of Gondor, Amba, Alegi, Edessi, and Gima. In Debre Marcos, Wingate followed the retreating Italians and undertook a series of harrowing actions. In early May, most of Gideon Force had to break off to provide a suitable escort for Haile Selassie's formal entry into Addis Ababa. Following the ceremonials, Wingate returned to Saforce, the main mission 101 force, which was harassing Maraventano's column. By the 18th of May, the column was dug in at Agibar. Facing Maraventano was a force of about 2,000, including only 160 trained soldiers, 100 from the Frontier Battalion, and 60 from the reformed 2nd Ethiopian Battalion. And many of these other forces were not trained. Both sides by this time were short of food, ammunition, water, and medical supplies. Wingate sent a message to Maraventano, falsely telling of a very substantial forces about to join him, playing on the likely imminent withdrawal of British troops, leaving the Italian column at the mercy of the Patriots. By 21st of May, having referred the matter to higher authority in Gondor, which had left the decision to him, Maraventano indicated an intention to surrender, with the formal honors taking place on 23rd of May. And the this is them entering Addis Ababa. This video here. By 21st of May, having referred the matter to higher authority in Gondor, which had left the decision to him, Maraventano indicated an intention to surrender with on May 23rd, Wingate accepted the surrender of 1,100 Italians and 5,000 colonial troops, 2,000 women and children, and 1,000 mule men and camp followers. By this time, his force contained only 36 regular soldiers to make the formal guard of honor at the surrender, the rest of his force being patriots. On the 18th of May, a small part of Gideon force led by the explorer Wilfred Tessinger blocked a force of 2,500 retreating Italians. On 24th of May, thinking he faced superior numbers, the Italian commander agreed to surrender to Tessinger. This is more of the emperor, exiled emperor, being brought back to Addis Ababa into Ethiopia. On the 12th of January, Amadeo, the Duke of Aosta, sent his elite Savoy Grenadiers division to defend KEREN. The Italian force at KEREN soon included 3 colonial brigades and the Savoy Grenadiers. The Savoy Grenadiers included 1 battalion of highly mobile infantry and the York Emba Battalion, the 1 battalion of elite mountain troops, Alfini, in East Africa. Lieutenant General Platt, his attack from the Sudan to Eritrea could only begin once reinforcements arrived from Egypt. In the meantime, he continued to conduct herring raids on Italian positions. The arrival of an Australian division in Egypt allowed General Laval to release the 4th Indian Infantry Division from Operation Compass to in the Western Desert. Further reinforcements in the form of a battery of 6-inch howitzers and a company of I tanks were also forthcoming. The arrival of the 4th Indian Infantry Division, which commenced on the 7th of January, together with intelligence concerning the Italian plans, greatly aided Platt's plans. The main British attack on Eritrea, originally scheduled to start on 8th of February with an attack against the railway junction in Kasawa, was brought forward on the 18th of January. However, the aggressive skirmishing in the previous month had prompted the Italians in late December to withdraw from their northern flank back to Keru and Wakai. Finally, on the 17th of January, Frusci ascended to the orders from Rome, one of the Italian commanders, and withdrew from Kasawa and Ticinai to concentrate in the Keru, Basaya, a Kota triangle where the mountains began. On the 19th of January 1941, Lieutenant General Platt's 2 divisions, the 4th Indian Infantry Division, commanded by Major General Noel Beresford Pierce, and the 5th Indian Infantry Division, commanded by Major General Lewis Heath, entered Kasawa, making the heavily fortified town of Agodat to the east. They made for that fortified town right to the east. On that first day, as the British and Commonwealth troops passed through Kasawa and entered Subdarat and Tessenai, the Italians were already dug in among the jagged foothills of the Eritrean plateau on the approaches to Agordat. So the Briggs Force, as the Indian divisions crossed the Eritrean border in the west, Briggs Force operated independently from the main force and under Platt's direct command, advanced eastward from the Sudan and entered Eritrea from the north through the border town of Karora. Briggs Force was four battalions under Brigadier Harold Ralden Briggs, two battalions from Briggs' own 7th Indian Infantry Brigade from the 4th Indian Infantry Division, together with two battalions from the French Brigade of the East, Brigade de Orient, one Senegalese colonial battalion, and one Free French battalion. After capturing Italian positions near Carora, Briggs' force fought its way to the northern defenses of KEREN and linked up with the main force in March. Advancing east from Kasawa towards Agordat, the 4th Indian Division, still with only one understrength brigade available, that'd be the 11th Indian Infantry Brigade, but with Gazelle Force under command, took the northern road near Wakai and Karu. Meanwhile, the two brigades, a 5th Indian Infantry Division, a 3rd Brigade, and the Indian Infantry Brigade had remained to cover the Agabat position. So they took that position, cover in that position. Took the southern road via Tessanai, Kotu, and Barentu. Both roads were mined and sown with spikes, placing a heavy burden on the engineers to maintain the momentum of the advance. Here's a map of so exactly where finally going into Eritrea. This is the Allied movements in advance from coming in from Sudan and pushing down through into Ethiopia, so Eritrea here, and then finally so moving into Eritrea, um, and so this is here in early January is when some of the offensives have begun, and so KEREN, we're going to talk about Agordat is what I've talked about. So this is the Allied advance through in here. It is ABABA. This is here. It's Somalia. This is today. There's Yemen, Sudan, Eritrea today, Southern Sudan, and Kenya. So you can see where this map here. Just wanted to give everybody a location of where this is. On the 21st of January, the 5th Indian Division had occupied Aikota without opposition, and Gazelle Force had reached the strong defended position at the Gorge, held by 5 Italian battalions. The Italian position at Karu was undone by both a move by Major General Heath, who sent the 2nd Battalion Highland Light Infantry and the 2nd Motor Machine Gun Battalion from the 10th Indian Brigade northeast along a track from Ekota to the rear of the Italian position at Karu. On the 22nd January, when 4th Indian Division put in their attack, the 5th Indian Division detachment were across the Italians' rear line of communication. The Italian position, which should have been held for weeks, became untenable, and while some elements of the Italian 41st Brigade managed to escape across country in the night, General Fongoli, with his staff and guns, and 1,200 men were taken prisoner. So that's in that area. They've taken that area now. 25th of January, the lateral line of communication between Agordat and Barentu had been cut, leaving these two strong points isolated from each other. Agordat was defended by 4 infantry brigades supported by 76 guns and a company each of medium and light tanks, all under the command of General Lorenzini. The 4th Indian Division's 2nd Brigade, 5th Indian Infantry Brigade, had by now concentrated from Egypt and Beresford Pierce, therefore Egypt and Beresford Pierce therefore paused to allow it, together with the first 4 I tanks, to move into the front line. On the evening 28th of January, he sent the 11th Indian Brigade's 314th Punjab Regiment on a flanking move into the Cochrane Hills to the south. On the 29th of January, they were joined by a second battalion, the 1/6th Rajputana Rifles. The 30th of January, they were counterattacked by 5 Italian colonial battalions with mountain artillery in support. The Indian battalions came under intense pressure and were forced to give way by counterattacking. By They're forced to give way, but counterattacked on the morning of the 31st January, and regained the lost ground. With Lorenzini's attention fully occupied by the events of the Cochrane, Beresford Pierce launched the 5th Indian Brigade in his main attack on the plain below, supported by the 4 I tanks. The tanks proved decisive, and by the evening the road to KEREN had been cut and the Italian defenders isolated. Once again the Italian forces attempted to get away in the hours of darkness, but 1,000 prisoners were taken and 43 guns captured. Meanwhile, the 5th Indian Division had attacked Barentu, and despite facing 8,000 defenders and 32 guns settled in the prepared defenses, they had prevailed without help from I tanks and occupied the town on 2nd February. Within 9 days, the forces of Beresford Pierce and Heath had advanced 100 miles, 160 kilometers, and broken through the Italian positions in the foothills to capture Agordat on the 1st of February. In total, 6,000 prisoners had been taken and 80 guns, 26 tanks, and 400 trucks captured. On the 21st of January, during the advance of the 5th Indian Division, Brigadier William Bill Slim was wounded by aerial strafing. Slim's command of the 10th Indian Infantry Brigade was assumed temporarily by Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Fletcher, commander of the brigade's 2nd Highland Light Infantry Battalion, until March, when Brigadier Thomas Pete Rees took over. And this is some of the men here. On the 31st of January in Metemma, the Italian garrison at Metemma in northern Ethiopia had been under increasing pressure for 3 weeks, and realizing that Platt's main thrust would not be coming from the Galabat direction, withdrew towards Gondar. This withdrawal allowed the 9th Indian Infantry Brigade of the 5th Indian Infantry Division to occupy Metemma. Now, see, this is where they're retreating. That's Gondar there, and this is an Ethiopian sector here. And then, of course, eventually, and then we're going to talk about Eritrea, right? We talked about Ethiopia and then Eritrea, and then so much of Sudan and Ethiopia was being taken first, and then, of course, Eritrea and onward. There's spots in Eritrea that were later on after, of course, Ethiopia falls, and then so, but of course, and then Platt's getting forces and support in from the forces that were defeated, and of course they finally won against for a certain amount of time in the Western Desert, so they brought some forces over to here, and then have another map on the next page to show it even better. Brigadier Mosley Main, 9th Brigade's commander, sent units along the road towards Wadney to harry the retreating Italian forces, fighting lively engagement 20 miles and 32 kilometers, and then 45 miles, 72 kilometers east of Metemma. Progress on the road was difficult because of the thickly laid minefields, and it was during this period that 2nd Lieutenant Pramindra Singh Bhagat of the Royal Bombay Sappers and miners won the first Victoria Cross for the British Indian Army in the Second World War for a continuous feat of sheer cold courage, clearing 15 minefields and 55 miles, 89 kilometers of roads in 18 hours of unbroken effort. By the 31st of January, the Duke of Aosta reported that the Italian military forces in East Africa were down to 67 operational aircraft with limited fuel. Okay, so here is from the first starting of the campaign in 1940 and into 41. So here, Italian forces are pushed back. Here's Gondor, and of course, Amba Alagi. And so you can see here Jima, Sodor, Gimbi, and of course KEREN. We're going to talk about KEREN here coming up because Italian forces are being pushed back up here into Eritrea. So this is the Abyssinia, Ethiopia. So as you can see, Force F, the Royal Navy Support Force, pushing up through in here. Infantry units and brigades. Here's the division here. So we're pushing back up into French Somaliland and British Somaliland, and then pushing into up through to. So here's the Northern Force, and this is. These are our attacking forces, but then here are that's from the Italian forces in 1940, and then our British and Allied attacks in 1941. As you can see here, they're coming in from the west and pushing back upward, and from here is what we call the naval force here, and pushing upward, and then as an air forces unit coming in through here, pushing down. So. And these forces coming in, they're from divisions from further west, the Northern Force. This is Platt's force, and he's going to take KEREN, which is going to be a major battle here, and then of course, they're retreating from Gondor, and then of course it's retreat for the Italians by this point. Here's the Southern Force with Cunningham, Southern Force, and 1st, 11th, and 12th African divisions, and they're pushing in upward, and that's early in February. So this is coming in from early in February 41 up into March, and then May, down to April, and then May of 40. And so this is coming in from 40 to 41 and onward, and then KEREN here in the spring of 41. So KEREN, when Italy entered the war, the town of KEREN, located 4,300 feet above sea level, was a small provincial capital located in the uplands of colonial Eritrea with no fortifications. In the winter of 1941-42, however, so 41 all the way to 42, however, the Italians turned the isolated and little-known locale into one of the bloodiest battlefields on the African continent. The fighting would actually be centered some miles southwest of the town in a ravine known as Dongolas Gorge, through which the main road and Agrodat Asamara railway ran on their way north to Mombasa, another city. You can see here the terrain height and elevation. So the southern approach to KEREN, generally blocked by a mountain range extending several miles to both sides of it. The official 5th Indian Division record describes the scene and military challenge presented by it. The whole mass of mountains, like a bleak and jagged screen, looms upward into the sky, some 2,500 feet above the green valley of approach. It is steep, high, immense, and forbidding. No picture can do justice to the physical effort of climbing past enormous granite domes and through a prickly bush more effective than any barbed wire. The soil crumbles beneath your feet, which can find no foothold, and the rocks, for all the cover they might give to climbing infantry, are easily dislodged if used as a lever to pull yourself up. At every step, spear grass stabs through the toughest clothing, and the skin is torn by the prickly thorn trees. One of the major problems of the KEREN battle was to get our infantry to grips with the enemy in a fit state to fight. The extortion of men laden with equipment, rifles, ammunition, shovels, was wearing on even the stoutest, and it is no wonder that these soldiers who did reach the almost unclimbable crests were momentarily too exhausted to make further effort. It was that moment of breathless exhaustion and strain the Italians were so often to choose for delivering a counterattack from their points of physical and moral vantage. The strategic strength of the position had been appreciated for many years by the Italians as providing a basis for the defense of their Eritrean colony. It was there that their field commander decided to make his stand and concentrate the bulk of his force. That included 3 Italian European and 14 colonial battalions. A 200-yard block where the road turned and entered the narrowest part of the gorge, was where the action began when it held up Gazelle Force and an ad hoc mobile reconnaissance group from the 5th Indian Division. The defenders had blown a portion of the gorge wall down onto the road and then covered that obstacle by fire. The Italians also had an advantage in the form of observation posts from which every British move could be seen, and they directed their fire accordingly. The 4th Royal Tank Regiment failed to get past, but on the 3rd of February, the 2nd Cameron Highlanders advanced uphill to the left to secure the ridge that since had been given their name. Reconnaissance to the right failed to find a sure way of fully outflanking the enemy in that direction. There was one gap that seemed to provide a possible line of advance. The Italian forward outposts, the only ones the Commonwealth guns could initially reach, were sited behind crests below the mountain peaks and were further protected by a double apron of wire to their front and back. Machine guns were set in stone dugouts, and the hard surface terrain allowed grenades thrown uphill to simply roll back down on the lower approaches. The knife-edged ridges shielded the defenders from the heaviest of the Commonwealth artillery fire. The overall Italian commander in Eritrea, the Duke of Aosta, reached the KEREN area on the 7th of February. With him came the 2nd Brigade as well as the 11th Brigade in retreat from Shoa, while the 6th Brigade covered the gorge. Most importantly, he brought 3 battalions of the Savoia Grenadiers, elite and battle-hardened troops commanded by Colonel Corsi. All totaled, the defenders numbered 25,000 troops backed by 144 guns. So this battle actually lasted. This is February until May. So I hope I haven't gotten any dates wrong. But so February till April 1st. February till 1st of February, and then this goes on till April 1st, and then on. So this is a month. This area it's like a couple month-long battle. KEREN proves to be one of the toughest, definitely in this theater. So this goes from February until April. Sorry, yes, it was a spring offensive overall because it goes from March into April, and from February and of course so winter and spring offensive. The first stage of this battle it occurred on the 5th to the 8th of February. The battle began in earnest on the 5th of February when the 11th Indian Brigade began an assault on the left of Dongolas Gorge, a move based on Gazelle Force's earlier reconnaissance. The 2nd Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders made their way to the front of Mount Sancho, where they were reinforced were reinforced the next day by the 3rd 14th Punjab Regiment. The Italian 65th Infantry Division counterattacked, with the effort spearheaded by the Savoia Grenadiers pushing back to the Highlanders. The 1/6 Ripuntana Rifles were just entering the ridge when the Italians pinned them, and the tide shifted back and forth as the defenders' guns fired down from above onto the precarious Commonwealth positions. Soldiers desperately needed on the ridge line were also needed simply to carry supplies and ammunition across 1,500 feet of mountainous and exposed terrain. February 6 brought new fighting as the 5th Indian Division began an assault on the eastern gorge, moving up from what was becoming known as Happy Valley. The assault was begun with the intent of outflanking the defenders in the direction of Aqua Call Hill. A company of the 4th 6th Rajputana Rifles made it all the way there by the evening of the 7th. However, with the supplies dwindling and under intense artillery fire, they were then forced back to their starting position, ending the first stage of the battle. The second stage, the 1st Punjab Regiment attacked on 10th of February, capturing Briggs Peak and the crest of Mount Sancho by the next morning. Once again, supply lines became an issue, which led to only 2 platoons actually staying on the top of the mountain, with the rest of the regiment strung out to carry ammo forward and wounded back. The positions of the Italians allowed them to hammer away at the Indians. The Savoia Grenadiers once again charged forward in a fresh counterattack, forcing back the Commonwealth troops. Without controlling the heights, the British were unable to bring forward their artillery. They had to fire blindly on the Italian positions, while the Italians, with their forward observers well ensconced on the heights, could bring down devastatingly accurate fire on the attackers. A renewed effort towards Aquacall was launched on the 12th, with reinforcements sent forward by the 5th Indian Division. The 29th Indian Brigade was intended as a reserve for the anticipated breakthrough. All available artillery was concentrated for the assault, and the 4th and 6th Rajputana Rifles were once again in the front. At the last minute, the continued desperate situation on the western side of the gorge necessitated the 2nd 5th Maratha Light Infantry be pulled off the attack to shore up the force there. The abundant natural thorn scrub provided the defenders with an additional deterrent that matched the barbed wire they'd earlier spread over the hills. Once again, a shortage of troops at key places in key moments and the difficult terrain prevented the capture of the mountain heights and resulted in another Commonwealth withdrawal. So the third stage, the 15th to the 27th of March, the British unseen commander, Lieutenant General Sir William Platt, withdrew his battle plan. He ordered 5th Indian Division to withdraw temporarily for a rapid refit. The motorized machine gun company and the 1st Duke of York's own Lancers, Skinner's Horse, were redeployed so as to seem to threaten the Italian lines of communication. To the northeast, Briggs' force, a combination of elements of the 4th Indian Division and two Free French battalions, had meanwhile crossed the Eritrean border and fought its way to Mesalit Pass, just 15 miles (24 kilometers) from KEREN. Platt concentrated both 4th and 5th Indian Divisions for an all-out push against Dongolas Gorge. The 4th would be responsible for the western part of the attack, concentrated against Mount Sanchil, while the 5th would concentrate to the east. The overall force numbered some 13,000 troops. The Italians had also been reinforced with the remainder of the Savoia Grenadiers. Their force totaled some 25,000 men and remained in control along the peaks. Their excellent firing positions had meanwhile forced the Commonwealth artillery out of Happy Valley and further back. The 5th Division Commander Major General Lewis Heath decided to concentrate on a narrow front, designating Fort Doagordok as a primary objective. If he could take that position, his division's artillery could enfilade all the forward Italian positions and interdict their supply lines, which had so far been immune from direct attack. The two divisional offensives were planned to take place on the 15th of March. The Royal Air Force had meanwhile also moved into bases near enough to support the battle by attacking Italian supply lines behind the pass. Close air support was a tactic that still lay in the future for the RAF. No longer would the Italians be able to shift their forces unimpeded on the far side of the gorge as they had during the previous assaults. The RAF also dropped propaganda leaflets in preparation for the attack, announcing the return of Emperor Haile Selassie. Ethiopian troops began to desert, and morale dropped among those units, with over 600 men coming into Commonwealth lines and providing more intelligence to Platt. At his final briefing, he had stated, "Do not let anybody think this is going to be a walkover. It is not. It is going to be a bloody battle against both enemy and ground. It will be won by the side that lasts the longest. I know you will last longer than they do, and I promise you I will last longer than my opposite number." So, of course, that's General William Platt here. From 3rd of March to April 1st, Platt's leadership played a large part in the successful outcome of the Battle of KEREN. The Eritrean capital, Asmara, was taken by the Indian 5th Infantry Division on 1st of April, while KEREN was still being mopped up by the Indian 4th Infantry Division. After the Battle of KEREN, Platt lost the Indian 4th Infantry Division, which returned to Egypt. The first move was made by the 4th Infantry Indian Division, which left its staging area at 7 a.m. The advance was along the entire divisional front from Mount Sanchil through the Briggs Peak to Mount Samana. Because of the broadness of that front, the numerous objectives within it, and the concentration of Italian forces against it, the 4th failed in all its efforts. During the following 48 hours of intense fighting, the division could at best be said to have managed to tie up a significant portion of the defending Italian force. The 5th Indian Division, attacking on a much narrower front, launched its assault at 10:30 a.m. Its 2nd Highland Light Infantry was in the lead, but it made no initial progress against the lower features, called Pimple and Pinnacle. The Italians in Fort Doagordok That's a hard one. And on Mount Sancho, continued to pour down artillery fire, again forcing the withdrawal of all the attacking units. That night, a full brigade led by the 3/5th Mahrata and the 312th Frontier Force took the two forward hills in what turned out to be the most decisive small unit engagement of the entire campaign. With those two positions in hand, a third battalion was brought forward for an attack on the fort proper. The Italians weren't ready to give up the lost positions. However, um, and on the morning of the 16th, they launched a counterattack. Fort Dolgorodok was actually a concrete trench with a few additional dugouts. The Italians stripped its garrison of troops for their counterattack, which left its undermanned left it undermanned when the 2nd West Yorkshire Regiment attacked, capturing it at 6:30 a.m. on the 16th and taking 400 prisoners. You can see here one of the, I think it's the Bren gun carrier Mark Ones of the, I think it's the fourth or fifth Indian Infantry Division. They're coming in near Battle KEREN. And this is here's another picture of some of the camel troops pulling up ammunition and forces up these hills, up these areas of up to 1,500 feet in certain spots, more or less. The forward artillery position the Commonwealth Command had long sought and fought for was finally available. The rest of that day was taken up through with simple repelling the fierce counterattack by the now desperate Italians who came in from three sides of the fort. The 17th of March saw the 10th Indian Brigade once more attacking up the slopes of Mount Sancho. Over the next 3 days, the Italian forces continued to make fierce counterattacks on both sides of the gorge, involving desperate, often hand-to-hand fighting. Platt and his commanders decided that the supreme attack should be made through the Dongolas Gorge. Heath felt that because of the physical defensive advantages, the Italians might have neglected their defenses. On the nights of 16th, 17th, and 17th of 18th of March, escorted engineers reconnoitered the roadblock and attempted to make a start to clear it. This failed because of interfering fire from the Italian lines. However, the information gathered made clear to Heath that the key to the gorge was not central, but two smaller features, informally named the railway bumps, which overlooked the roadblock and could be approached with much less opposition along the railway line from the tunnel below Cameron Ridge. An attack on the defenders at the head of the gorge was planned to give the sappers and miners 48 hours they needed to free of interference from mortar and machine gun fire required to clear the road. For this, Heath would need his full division and had to wait until 10th Brigade had refitted after its mauling on the central feature. The plan was for the 10th Brigade to advance into the gorge while 9th Brigade, which was holding the fort Dolgorodok positions, would move down to take three smaller hills overlooking the far end of the gorge, and 29th Brigade would then attack to take Mount Ziban, and behind it, to the east, Mount Canabai, which looked down on KEREN and guarded the road to Asmara. Command of the 10th Brigade was taken over by one of Heath's divisional staff officers, Thomas Pete Rees, while his predecessor, Lieutenant Colonel Bernard Fletcher, was released to form Fletcher Force, F Force, a mobile force comprising Central India Horse and 12 Matilda II tanks, which would be used to exploit the planned breakthrough in the gorge and move rapidly into the defenders' rear position and attack their reserves. So the Matilda tanks are becoming definitely in handy here, and Matilda is a good medium tank for infantry support and attacking these positions. at least is what they had. They were able to get them. Um, there's of course the Matilda 1 and then Matilda 2. Matilda 2 is an entirely new, bigger apparatus. We talked about that one before. March 24th, diversionary attacks were made on Satchel, while just before midnight, the West Yorkshires and the 3rd, 5th Marathas in Fort Dolagordoch moved down to take the lower hills overlooking the gorge. The West Yorkshires were able to take their hill unopposed, but the Marathas met heavy opposition, which was well dug in. However, by 0730 hours, all three hills were taken, and the gorge's defenses on its southeastern side were silenced. At 0300 on the 25th of March, the 2nd Highland Light Infantry and the 410th Belushi Regiment on their right advanced from the shelter of the railway tunnel previously cleared by the sappers and miners up the gorge. A 100-gun artillery bombardment was rained down on the ridge on Satchel above to suppress any defensive fire from this dominating height, and the attack in the gorge achieved complete surprise. With the defenders' attention focused on Sancho, the 3rd and 2nd Punjab Regiment then advanced between the Baluchis and the West Yorkshires to clear the gorge. By 0530 hours, the railway bumps and most of the objectives were captured, and the defenders no longer held positions from which to direct fire into the gorge below. The sappers and miners labored on the road while the battles on the Satchel and the Lagordoch features continued. By midday on the 26th of March, they had completed remaking the road through the gorge. In the early hours of 27th of March, the British artillery turned onto Zeeban and Falstoch. 29th Brigade passed through 9th Brigade's positions to launch their attack at 0430 hours, but when they made their assault, they found the defenders had withdrawn and were able to occupy Falistock Ridge and the two Zeeban summits unopposed. The Italian position was now untenable, and by first light the Royal Air Force was reporting their withdrawal along the road from KEREN to Asmara. The defenders on the Senchil Ridge were less fortunate and now effectively cut off the Savoy Grenadiers and Bersaglieri were left with no option but surrender. Fletcher Force was in KEREN by 10:30 hours and was then sent in pursuit along the Asmara Road. So that's the Battle of KEREN. This is now, of course, this is just the next step in defeating the Italians in East Africa. One major step, and then we'll be continuing on part 2 with those steps. Determined Italian troops retreated to Carleton. Their new position, however, was considerably less tenable than KEREN had been, and Italian forces finally surrendered on the 1st of April 1941. French battalions took Montesulo and Fort Umberto April 7th and led the Allies to Massawa on 8th of April. Colonel Montclair of the 13th French Foreign Legion Demi Brigade captured the Italian Admiralty building and accepted the surrender of 10,000 Italian naval personnel, bringing the unit's tally to 14,000 prisoners. Within a week of the Italian surrender at Carleton, both Asmara and Massawa had surrendered despite orders from Italian dictator Benito Mussolini to continue to fight. Massawa was subsequently used as a staging port for both British and American naval forces. The battle is still today considered a positive episode in Italian military history, despite its outcome, thanks to the bravery of the Italian and colonial troops and the skilled leadership shown by the defeated commander, General Carmineo. In the account of the battle written in Eastern epic, Compton Mackenzie wrote, "Keren was as hard a soldier's battle as was ever fought, and let be said that nowhere in the war did the Germans fight more stubbornly than those Italian Savoia battalions, Alfini, Bersaglieri, and Grenadiers. In the first 5 days fight, the Italians suffered nearly 5,000 casualties, 1,135 of them killed. Lorenzini, the, the gallant young Italian general, had his head blown off by one of the British guns. He had been a great leader of Eritrean troops. The fortunate license of wartime propaganda allowed the British press to represent the Italians almost as comic warriors. But except for the German parachute division in Italy and the Japanese in Burma, no enemy with whom the British and Indian troops were put up a finer fight than those Savoia battalions at Keren. Moreover, the colonial troops, until they cracked at the very end, fought with valor and resolution, and their staunchness was a testimony to the excellence of the Italian administration and military training in Eritrea. So this is part one. This concludes part one of the Eastern Africa Campaign 1941. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Aaron Bouma, military specialist for Carleton County. This is one famous picture of Keren, the Battle of Keren in the town.